The line is going to be on Kuf Lamed Vav, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down from the top. And we're saying right at that period there, you with us? With Pratius Yoser, Yesh Lomar, in further detail, we can say that even the Giloy of the Etzam of the Neshama, the revelation of the essence, Yeshnam Dugmas Shtein Yamina. There's also an example of these two levels, under duress versus accessing like through your own truth and your own essence. The Giloy Etzam Neshama Be'inyan Mesiris Nefesh. When it comes to revealing the essence, when you're actually having Mesiris Nefesh, you're standing there willing to die. Yesh Lomash Benogei LeKochos HaGiloyim Hu Kamo Davar Nosa. This is the line we left off last time. That in comparison to your in relationship to what we call your Kochos HaGiloyim. I'd like a definition on that if you remember from yesterday. But we're going to say compared to your Kochos HaGiloyim, your revealed powers. What is that? And what are the revealed powers? Mind and heart. Your soul and body. Right. Yeah. The person that you think is you. Let's put it like that. Right. As opposed to like the higher echelons of your soul, which are your hidden powers, but it's sort of like your subconscious self, which is higher than you're aware of. So, if you're having Mesiris Nefesh and you're willing to die for Hashem, that's great. Like Mazel Tov, you reached a great level of yourself there, but in compared to your revealed powers, your mind, your heart, yourself, it could be like it's some outside force acting on you, right? And then we did say this one last line, which is very, very intense. Oh, I need to put this on, don't I? Okay, sorry. Which is that in the days of Russia, the Rebbe is now speaking to the people in the crowd a little bit intensely. We spoke about it yesterday. There were those who lived a life of Mesiris Nefesh for many, many years, like consecutively and continuously.
What's like an exact definition of
Mesiris Nefesh is to give your life.
For God.
To God, yeah. Like to Moser means to like give over. Nefesh is your soul. So you're willing to. If someone comes, the literal definition is if someone comes and says they're going to kill you if you continue to do mitzvahs, you say like, okay, then kill me. Like I'm in. You can't stop me from doing the mitzvahs, right? So there's certain few things where you actually have to die rather than transgress those three cardinal sins, right? But in a time of what they call shmad, which is basically when the government has decreed that Jews are not allowed to keep Torah, which sadly has happened all too many times. So then there's like a concept of having Mesiris Nefesh even for much more minor sins, because you're basically protecting and defending like the honor of the whole religion. Mm-hmm. It's not a personal thing at that point. You become like an ambassador of Torah for everybody. Mm-hmm. So in communist Russia, it was mamish like that, sadly. Like they were getting killed for being Jewish and for practicing Judaism. And we find that they were actually doing that for years and years, like in unbelievable feats of righteousness. And yet when they came to the land of the free, the home of the brave, they were not having, like they were chilling, right? You didn't see the intensity of them, that these are Jews willing to die for God. I'm sure they were still nice and religious, but like that level of adrenaline intensity pumping into their Yiddishkeit was no longer seen on them, right? And why is that? Here, we're going to take it from, sorry, I skipped a line. The line's going to start, Sha'amdu, right? Ki zeh sha'amdu mesiris nefesh. Meshek kam v'kam shanim hu lefisha he'ir behem gilui etzem neshama shelamayla mikochas hagiloim. Why were they able to stand at Mesiris Nefesh for so many years? It's because it's shown upon them a revelation of the essence of their soul, which is higher than their kochos hagiloim. In other words, it was like triggered, it was brought out from them. Due to the Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation, the Frierdiker Rebbe, like sort of like instilling in them this feeding of their faith, right? It didn't happen automatically, but they had it in them, and he triggered it. And what happened? A level of their soul which is above their kochas hagiluim. What is that? Your chaya and your yechida, the levels of the soul which where we said above the soul sees God, right? And your vast parts of your own self, which are not contracted and contained inside of the limited nature of what you think of yourself. There's much more of you. It says, and even an angel stands at the size of like a third of the world, right? These are spiritual entities that are just like enormous, and our souls are like covering like universes, right? So that is really the real you. A tiny little fingernail drop of light like squeezes into this body, and all of a sudden you have consciousness and bring the flesh to life, and we foolishly think that that's us. It's also us, but it's just a little tiny piece. So there's a whole other force of your true belief system, your answers, and that had this amazing power of being triggered and ignited by the previous Rebbe to make them do crazy things, like get up in the morning ready to die. But these levels of the soul, which are above the kochas hagiluim, right? It didn't actually. It was forcing, as it were, the actual self in the body to acquiesce, much like Matan Torah, where there was like a force compelling us. The force in this case was our own soul, but nonetheless, compared to their own kochos hagiluim, their own mind and heart, it was like something else coercing them. And there was no change in the actual powers of the soul, the revealed powers of the souls themselves. The mind and heart didn't change. They were just like redirected so long as the threat was there. Okay, so far everybody's with me? Yeah? All right. So so he says in brackets here, so one might say, well, wait a second. How is that possible that your own self could be in conflict with another part of yourself? Isn't the parts of me that are mind and heart also like inside of my essence? In which case, if my essence is triggered and is reacting, wouldn't it like sort of bring my own mind and heart along for the ride? Isn't it the essence of my kochos hagiluim, of my revealed powers? So the Rebbe puts in brackets here to sort of stay that question. And he says the essence of the soul, yes, it's the essence of the revealed powers, but it's in such a way, but it's in such a way that the essence of the soul is sort of relegated to being something which is sort of their essence and not them, right? Because you can have this idea that, let's say, for example, let's put it into terms which is actually seemingly more complicated but much easier to understand, strangely, which is God, right? God has what we call his essence and his light. And the definition between these two things is that they really stay in their own quadrants and necessarily so, meaning to say, the essence is defined by that which does not shine, which cannot reveal itself. That's why we call it essence. There's aspects of Hashem which can, he basically brings these infinite rays. And so we call this the Or Ein Sof, right? But it's only the Or of the Ein Sof. It's the light that comes out of the Ein Sof. Because the Ein Sof itself is essential and cannot shine, right? It's like, if it shines, that's almost a definition that what you're dealing with is not the essence, right? So that's kind of bleeds into a very interesting Chassidic concept that, like, basically when you're seeing God, we spoke about it before when the Alter Rebbe was in these states of Dvekis, and he would say, all I want is you. I don't want your Gan Eden. I don't want your Olam Haba. Why didn't he want Gan Eden and Olam Haba? What's wrong with those things? Because when you're experiencing God's revelation, that's almost a clear indicator that you're not experiencing God's essence, right? Because if you can grasp it and you can understand it and you can perceive it, then it must be limited. Because the true unlimited God is ungraspable and unperceivable, right? So you see, essence can be like relegated, as it were, to something that is sort of specifically not associated with the revealed powers. And so this is the answer to what we said a moment ago. Even though we could say, how can my essence be like compelling me to do something that I don't want to do? Isn't it my essence? So the idea is because in this capacity, we're seeing the essence as something which is relegated in its own quadrant, as it were, other than, the unforeseen, the unexplained, the unrevealed. And it's that level of the hidden powers which may in some mystical way contain the revealed powers. But in a conscious way, there's something else. They're their essence. And therefore, therefore they don't relate to the nature of the revealed powers themselves, to the finite properties of your mind and of your heart. They're essential. They don't mix in to this finite, meaningless sense of self, right? So even though your essence of your soul could be brought to bear, And strangely enough, it could sort of have nothing to do with you because you're relating to your essence in such a way that it is specifically something other than the finite expression of how you see yourself. Make sense? Whereas, here we go, we're going to the higher level now. Hagila de etzem neshama bezeshu nishba v'nitkem bezeshu nimsa begalus. There was a second level, the second part of the Megillah. This that a person is crushed merely because they're found in Gullus. There's no sword at your throat. There's no knife at you. It's all good, great mikvahs, good cholent, easy times. The life of an American Jew, basically, right? And yet, you find yourself broken. Why wasn't the Rebbe living the same carefree, chilled out life in the 60s as all the other people in America, right? Because his soul was crushed because we were in exile. He couldn't just be happy with the revelations. The revelations is meaningless. I don't want your Gan Eden. I don't want your Olam Haba. I want you. So if there's one place in this world where godliness is not fully revealed, I'm not satisfied, right? So he was just in a perpetual state of not being satisfied. And this is the Rebbe that we know. A guy comes in, he says, Rebbe, I just donated $1 million. He says, great, next time you'll give 2. Right? And this is an actual true story, and this is an emblematic story of a person who's gone mad. He cannot be satisfied. Right? He sits at the edge of his chair, he doesn't sleep, he can't eat. Why? Because there's some Jew in Texas that didn't put on tefillin today. And what's going on with that? It's like a crazy state of being. It's the essence of the soul, which is just cannot relax until Elokus is everywhere. So this notion that we're just broken simply because of the fact that we're in exile. This shegam kochas hagiloim shelo hatzir de kochas hagiloim hem k'mochad ima etzem. So this is going to the next level. All that we said before about how the essence is relegated to some different quadrant from the light and the revelation, that does not have to be like that. That is actually a kind of duality that we're imposing upon the situation of God and His world. It says, B'yomahu yeh Hashem echad u'shmo echad, right? On that day it will be Hashem is one and His name will be one. Whereas right now Hashem and His name are not one, right? That's what the Gemara asks, right? And it actually says yes. Today, instead of saying Hashem's name the way it's actually pronounced, we pronounce it in a different way, right? Hashem's name is not as it should be. We say instead of Yud Kei Vav Kei, we pronounce it Adni, right? It's a weird thing. You ever wonder why you just don't read that word, right? And the idea is because exactly what we're talking about. There's an idea that when the name comes out, what does the name represent? The revelation, right? When the revelation comes out, it can be seen as something distinct and other and separate from the essence. And that's how we see it. That's why we cloak it in a different name. To say that basically the essence is over there and it does not mirror its definition in the revealed realms. But in the future, on that day, Hashem will be one and His name will be one, means that we will actually pronounce Hashem the way it's written, because it will be the same when it comes outside as it is inside. In other words, our revealed powers do exist inside the essence. And this law that we said, that the essence has to be sort of unknown and unrevealed, if you think about it, that is a very strong limitation to put on God. To say that there's an aspect of Him which is so high that it can't be seen. On one hand, we like that, because we do believe in an infinite God that is beyond comprehension, right? On the other hand, if you're going to say that God is beyond comprehension, period, you're limiting the powers of God. If Hashem wanted to, He could theoretically reveal in a comprehensible way, in the ray of light, which is supposed to be expressing Him, which presently, that has to always come out in a way where it condenses Him, contracts Him, and conceals Him. But in theory, He could reveal Himself exactly as He is. In which case, the revealed powers, right, they could become one and synonymous with the essence, in theory. Let me just make sure everyone's following what we're trying to say here. You catching on to this? Yeah? Moshe, how you doing in there? Not getting it?
I don't even know what the first one was, or the first one was.
All right, let's go back to it then for a second. We're talking about right now is two relationships.
I don't have my glasses, so I can't see.
You want to get your glasses? You lost your glasses, so your mind is somewhere else.
Open your eyes.
Just open your eyes, man. So, should we go through this one more time? Try and get on the train?
What's the first one?
There's two relationships where we're saying with ourselves and our body and our essence, essentially. Right? One is that they're considered as opposing forces. Your revealed powers are called revealed because they come in a contracted way. Why are they called revealed? What does it mean for something to be revealed? It means it can be contained, and it can be measured, and it can be grasped and therefore understood. So that's why you are like in possession, quite literally, of your intelligence and your emotions. Like those are powers of God, of your soul, which condense to the point that you can like wrap yourself around them and possess them. And therefore that sort of shows that they are limited, and a limited aspect of God. It's not like the true God. If the true God would walk into the room, he would obliterate any ability to grasp or capture him. The notion of self, I, that I can like be aware of my own independence because I can grasp and surround a particular stream of life force and make it my own, is because I'm dealing with a finite stream of life force. If it was an infinite stream, I wouldn't be able to experience finiteness, right? So we're saying like the essence of yourself is sort of like this infinite thing, and the only way that you can have any glimpse of it is if it contracts itself into your body. Those are your revealed powers, in which case the essence of yourself and the you that you're aware of are really two different things. There's like a duality there, right? And even though you could say that the revealed parts of yourself come from your essence, but nonetheless when they come out, they're already at odds with the essence, to the point that if you're going to actually go according to the essence down here, it could be in a way that you're almost under duress. It's like forcing you to do things which are not really aligned with yourself, because it's like a power which is sort of beyond you. And therefore, when the essence is not being triggered by a Haman or by a Stalin, and it goes away, the you will revert back to the you that was before, which is not being imposed upon by your essence, and therefore you could live many, many, many years in a state of total mysterious nefesh, and it really had no real effect on you, because you were dealing with your essence as it was like as a foreign entity. Do you want to ask something?
When talking about the essence of a person,
Yeah.
is it that it's not the same? Like, I feel like the revealed powers are a part of the essence, just like a sliver kind of.
Right.
But the essence as a whole, is that, like, if the revealed powers are intelligence,
And emotions.
Intelligence or emotions, what would I know we can't grasp it.
It's like faith.
It's just like, it's not an extension of intelligence. It's something else.
It's beyond intelligence, right? That's the whole point why it's able to make you do things that don't make any sense, like die, right? Because you're being possessed by a power which is not comprehensible. And so no one's going to die. Again, even we said the other religions, sometimes they die for their religion, but even there's some kind of a reason behind it, right? We're talking about dying for no reason. It's just like I can't help it because there's parts of me which are not intellectually based. It precedes the intellect. We call it the kesser, the crown. It's a part of you that you don't usually see because we operate on our day-to-day basis from our mind and our emotions. Those are like our operating, system. But every once in a while, this other thing that we didn't even realize that we have emerges when Moshe feeds us and Stalin comes looking for us. Right? It's like, whoop, all of a sudden I realize there's another aspect of me which is completely does not operate by intellect. It operates by faith, by being like basically one with this divine principle, which it just leads me around according to what it wants, not according to what my intellect says. We will do and then we'll understand. That was no joke. Like we signed up for something crazy. We got this other soul which has a mind of its own, basically. Right? Now, Moshe, you with me? So that's so far so good, right? Now, the idea is that it makes perfect sense to say that we have this relationship with our essence, that it's like this other entity which is controlling ourselves. But on the other hand, is that really our essential self if it's in conflict with me? That's like putting me at odds with my own essence, which is like a strange duality. It's almost like saying God is at odds with his own world. Like, yeah, God can make his world do whatever he wants if he likes going to like come into it and force it to do something and make it go against its own nature. That's really weird. Isn't God like the creator of the world? Why does he have to have this relationship with it where he like comes in and bosses it around? It's him, after all, right? So if you're going to look at God as this outside force, like operating on his world, you have like a a dualistic perspective of what God is. In reality, when you get to the real God, the world would acquiesce to God's will in the same way that sort of God would acquiesce to God's will, because it is in fact a part of him. That's what I was saying before. On that day, he will be one and his name will be one. Which means even his name, even like the part of him which is the world, the revealed powers, the contracted ray, right? It will come to realize that it is not something which is in opposition to the essence, but it is one with the essence, right? And therefore what we're saying is when you're in a state of crushedness, merely because you're in exile, not because something is forcing you, not because this soul above is forcing you. You just came to the realization that your mind and your heart themselves are dissatisfied so long as there is not, like, in other words, the absence of godliness goes against the revealed you, not just like the supernatural Jewish you, right? It's and therefore you've kind of harmonized with your true essence. Your revealed powers are now in line with your essential powers. And that is a sign that your true essence has walked into the room. Because the essence we were talking about before was like a relegated type of essence. If I could put my essence over there, what kind of essence is that? That means is it really that essential that it's like doesn't reach me? The essence is supposed to be everywhere, all permeating the one God everywhere. So now that only when you actually align your mind and your heart and like your whole self is in line with your supernal powers, then can we say in truth that you've accessed your essence. And therefore we're saying that only when there's no Stalin coming after you, only when there's no artificial force, even if it's from your own soul, compelling you to do something, but you yourself are dissatisfied with the lack of godliness, that's when there's a true alignment of your revealed powers and your concealed powers, and then we can say that you've actually truly accessed the essence. And therefore, what comes out from this is that only in a generation like ours, where there is no compelling force, can we actually reach the ultimate essence. The Rebbe's like giving us a huge gift over here. We thought, we're like second tier to our great ancestors who like lived and died for this thing. We can live and die for it too, but in terms of our own sense of what's right and wrong, and like because we're living and dying it by choice, not by coercion. Yeah.
So when you have like different revealed powers, like
mind and heart,
when you have revealed powers like intelligence and emotion, there's different people can have different levels of it, of emotion and intellect, and in different categories. One's smarter, one's more emotional. So with the essence, is there any like uniqueness for an individual? Beautiful. It depends. Sounds like for everyone it's the same, or maybe it's like different people have different levels of fervor or whatever.
Right. So it's exactly, you're right in line with exactly what we're saying right now. If you're dealing with an essence which is sort of relegated to be something oppositional to your revealed powers, then like almost everybody has the same. Because it's the notion of just what is the essence, that which is beyond finite distinction. Yeah, it's basically singularity. That's what the essence is. Like we're at one level, we're all one with God, and we don't have really individual. Yeah. If you want individual, that's plurality, and that's like over there. So I need my access point to the singularity to sort of override my individualism. So that's the limited view of the essence. The real view, the real Jewish view of the essence, is that the essence also contains all the plurality that could possibly be. Because the essence is truly unlimited, which means it's simultaneously a singularity and a plurality at the same time, because that's God, and only God can do such a thing that we can't possibly understand. Right? And the idea is, the way that we actually explain that just in simple more human terms, is that even though there's a plurality, and all of plurality, everything that could possibly ever was, is, and will be, it is not imposing or negating or contradicting the singularity. Which is very hard for us to understand, but if it's the idea of like things break down into theoretical forms. So all the possible distinctions and divisions and plurality is there, but in a way where it's what we call bittul b'metzias. It's in a state of non-being, in which case it doesn't interfere or negate the singularity. So you can have plurality and singularity at the same time, and God is that. And therefore, that's the true essence, because that really makes sense to be an essence of God. That's just like, no one can understand that, right? So if you can access that, or how do you access that? It's when the regular old individual you is in perfect alignment with this, like with the singularity. In other words, they're operating in the same way. In other words, you're using your mind and your heart with your individual mind and heart, not his, with the same vigorous intensity of ready to die for God. But you're not negating your mind and heart in that process. You're utilizing your mind and heart in that process. And that's kind of the idea of shlichus, right? This is what the Rebbe's like gearing us up to this is the Rebbe's last mimer. It's very complicated, but he's trying to explain like what he wants from us, which is that I don't want you to just like throw yourself away and like literally throw your life away for like some symbol of divine truth. We want your life to be the symbol of divine truth. And you do it in your way, and you have your shlichus, and you have your shlich, and no one can do it like you. Because you have to give in an irrational way, you have to devote your mind and your emotions irrationally to this cause. Which means, like we said before about the yeshiva, right? Chayali Beis David. What is a soldier in the house of David? Irrationally going to war, like you divorce your wife, or you divorce yourself from all worldly matters. That's an irrational way for a Jew to live. And that's what we were saying before about the Rebbe's. Like, how can a person just give $1 million and he's just like right away asking for 2? Why is he not satisfied? Why is he not sleeping? Why is he not eating? What's going on with this guy? It's because he's like divorced his worldly concerns. And that is an irrational way of using your mind and your heart. Right? A normal person is going to use his mind and his heart to acquire things, to support his self. When you fuse the essence, which takes into the true essence takes into account your own mind and your heart, but it's all aligned towards the essential purpose of yourself.
When we basically allow,
How do you
Hold on a second. He's in the middle of asking a question. 1 second.
revealed and revealed powers.
Say it again.
When we unite them, basically.
Unite them. Okay.
When we use them for
So you've actually achieved the essence if you've united them. Yeah.
what occurs again. What's the
We're saying that you're simultaneously in a state of irrational faith, but also like in utilization of your unique character and self. So you're using your mind, right, to contrive divine plans. You're using your emotion to feel divine feelings in a state of like endless love of God, as opposed to allowing your mind to be busy with you and your business, or your heart and your emotions to be busy with you and your business. That's like Hashem is not one with His name, right? Because when the essence, yes, I believe in God, but He's over there somewhere, right? Whereas I'm over here, I'm stuck with myself. What can I do? When you come to the realization, ein od milvado, that even the details are also one with the essence, so you sort of lose your sense of individuality in one sense, but on the other hand, it absolutely promotes and strengthens your individuality, because your individuality is that part of God, right? 4 lines from the bottom, unless you want to make a comment. You don't have to make a comment. I'm just
No, not a comment, just a question.
Okay.
Trying to catch up. What do you define as the singularity or a singularity here?
It's literally where there's the level of godliness where there's no distinctions. Everything is one.
Okay.
All is one.
It's the oneness.
The oneness of God.
The integration of both aspects.
No,
Revealed
no.
and unrevealed?
No, that's already like a higher level of that's like singularity and plurality together.
Okay.
So there's singularity. I think this is good. We hit on an easy way to describe this, right? There's the singularity versus the plurality, which means God is one, but like over there, because here God is not one, right? I've got a table, chairs, people. You've got 2 eyes and a nose. You're looking good, right? It's like you're not one, because He sits in that chair and you sit in this chair. Who are you fooling, right? This is plurality, but I believe in God. And I do believe that there's like a place or some kind of a level where like ein od milvado, there's nothing but Him, and there's all pure singularity and oneness, right? And that's true. There is such a place. So what we're saying is that the normal way of, and that let's call that the essence. So the normal way of us relating to the essence as believing Jews is, yes, it's there, but when it comes to the game, when it wants to like protrude, it basically equalizes all of us, and it makes us all like just like surrender our individuality and just do what He wants. And we're like puppets to the singularity, right? It has obviously it doesn't come into our zone entirely because it would negate everything, but it has an effect on the place of plurality, and it makes the plurality like it forces the plurality to act in accordance with the will of the singularity, right? So that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is what you've just done there is you've relegated the essence to be in some place. Well, what kind of an essence is it if it's not the whole thing, right? The essence is meant to be that there is nothing but the essence. In which case we have to say that the true essence is not the singularity versus its opponent in the plurality, but the true essence is somehow simultaneously the singularity and the plurality as one. And therefore, if I'm really going to achieve level of essence, I cannot negate my plurality, my individual spot here. I have to incorporate both of them at the same time. And when does that come up? Not when something is coercing me in my faith, a Stalin or a Haman, but when nothing is coercing me, it's just natural, it's just me that can't deal with a world without God. Because that means that even in the place of the plurality, it requires God to be in there because it knows that it's fused and united and it's one with the will of God. And therefore, it's not a separate entity having a relationship with God. It too is God.
I think I might have lost some of the key points here. So, singularity is an aspect of our soul? Or is it?
It could be, yes.
Or does it go beyond that?
Our soul goes all the way up to becoming God at some point. Like at the highest echelons of our soul, it just is God. It's the source of the source goes into the source and become one, right? So when I'm talking about the essence of the soul, I'm also basically simultaneously talking about the essence of God, right? Just like God, when he comes out of his essence, so to speak, he contracts and makes levels and levels and levels and levels until it comes into finite plurality. So too our soul goes through that journey. And it becomes individuated until it pops into your body and becomes like a separate thing. So again, you could look at that as two things. Hashem versus his name. And that's how we see it in today's time. And that's why we don't call Hashem by his name. Because we're saying like his presence over here is somehow fundamentally different than his true self. But in the future, which is the Rebbe's like giving us like a plan, a roadmap to the future, he will be one and his name will be one. Which means we won't see us over here as some opposing force to his essence.
That's the singularity.
That's the singularity and the plurality coming together and joining as one. Let's move on. 4 lines up from the bottom. It's complicated. Listen, I'm not going to say it's not, but we're going into 4 lines up from the bottom. Yesh Lomar. When you're going to see the essence of the soul and your sort of finite powers of your soul as 2 different things, like we were describing, the singularity and the plurality, it's because you, silly man, are putting the essence of your soul into some category and relegating it, which is like never a good idea to try and relegate the essence and limit its expanse, right? So when you see your essence and yourself as 2 different things, you're actually your definition of Hashem's essence is a limited one. And what is its limitation? That it's that it's a singularity. It's above my finite, limited space. Which is how most people think of God, right? He's like over there somewhere because clearly he's not here because then I would be an idol worshiper, right? Like this is a place of many and God is one. So we have to create this like duality in our minds. Aval mitzad etzem neshama kamoshu mushrashes ba'atzmos. But when it comes to the essence of the soul, as it truly is united with the essence of God, the real essence, hapeshitus da neshama batzir da kocha shela hem kula chad. So the simple one singularity of the soul, plus its depiction, its powers, they're one there. And I do believe this requires me to go into an explanation of what I said before, like, how can it be that you can have many and one at the same time? So all I said up until now was that the many is in such a way that it's like bittul, it's like in a state of potential, and therefore it doesn't impinge upon the oneness, right? But if we could look into that for 1 second, I'd like to give you an analogy which maybe could be helpful, because that's really what he's saying here. You're going to go to a place, you're going to see that even though there's something called pshitis, which means simple singularity, right? the simpleness of the soul and the powers of the soul are there simultaneous as one, that is a problem for the human mind to wrap its head around without Chassidic explanations, because it's a complete contradiction in terms. You can't be many in one at the same time, and yet that's what we're saying that it is. So how does that, what's a good analogy for that? I'm going to try. We've gone through this little meditation before. You have different levels of letters. Right, I'm going to go ahead and take the risk of maybe this like closing out the class, even though we've got a good 10 minutes left, but hopefully not, right? But you have letters at different levels. And let's talk about, for example, thought, speech, and action letters, right? So you got a letter you can actually write down. It's much concrete, taking up space on a piece of paper. Then you have a letter that you speak, which is like potentially measurable in like sound waves, but it's much more ethereal and spiritual than a aleph on a piece of paper. And then you've got the letter aleph in your mind. You're just thinking aleph. It's like you can't even find it with a microscope, right? It's something mamash spiritual, but it's still physical in the physical world. But it's you can see that it's the same aleph, but it just like goes up a dimension. And then it doesn't end there. You've got then in your emotional world, before letters even come up on your screen, because the first time letters appear in your system is in thought. And then they come a little bit more concrete in speech, and then fully you can write them down in action. That's thought, speech, and action. What is before thought in the anatomy of the soul? Someone help me out with this one. What precedes thought in the anatomy of the soul? When I say anatomy of the soul, your soul is made up of garments and what? And the actual soul, which is made up of 10 soul powers, right? From 10 soul powers. Your soul is made up of Chokhmah, Bina, Das, not thought. No, three of them.
The three is the mind.
The mind,
Seven
not
is
thought, exactly, right? And the other 7 are emotions. So your intellect, let's call it intellect, and emotions, that's what we were saying before, is like your revealed powers. So on top of your revealed powers, cloaking your revealed powers, is your thought, speech, and action, your garments of your soul. There is where letters like start emerging. Like we're amazing. We work with these letters. Like we're just sitting here. Imagine if we were just a bunch of animals sitting around this table. Like we didn't have letters. We're just like, what are we doing here, right? There's like a whole like world taking place between like these mystical transfer of letters, right? Of information and communication and emotion, and we haven't even like shook hands, right? Like what's going on over here? It's amazing. We don't like take it for granted, this power that we pass back and forth. But we share ourselves with each other through the agency of Pashut letters, right? Letters are a big deal. And letters begin, their first time they even enter the conversation is as a garment of the soul in thought, and then speech, and then action. And there's different levels of letters. Thickness, you could say. Now, what precedes thought is your emotions. Before the garments comes the 10 spheros, which begin from below to above with your emotions. Yeah? You with me there? That's the lower part of your soul. It's the emotional self. So emotions are sort of what we call non-verbal, which means there's no language in emotions. That's why you call it an emotion. Instead of thinking it in letters, you feel it. You're feeling love. You're feeling fear. You're not having a thought process about that in its origin, right? But are there letters in there or not? And the idea is since my feeling of love is shortly thereafter going to produce a thought of love, and then maybe even a speech of love, and I'm going to write you a love letter, that means that even in my emotions, there must have been hidden letters in there. Because where did they come from suddenly? They didn't just like appear out of nowhere. They were produced from within the emotion, but when they were in the emotion, there were no letters there. They were in a state of non-being, right? Now, even that emotion itself, where did that emotion come from? The emotion didn't invent itself. I like saw something, or I watched something, or I had an experience of I read something interesting, and I got intellectually stimulated, and that created the emotion. So the emotions themselves were actually first contained inside of my intelligence. And they gave birth to my emotions. We actually call the intelligence the mother and the father in Kabbalah, because they give birth to the emotions. So the letters, which eventually came out of my emotion, which were previously inside of my emotion, they were previously, all of that, the emotion and the letters inside of there were previously inside of my intelligence. So the letters exist I'm trying to show you, in writing, speaking, thinking, and then then they go inside, right? All writing, speaking, and thinking are the letters as they pop out. But then there's a whole world of the letters as they are inside. Their level of negation inside the emotion is much less than their level of negation as they are inside of the intellect. You following this? Yeah? And then it goes higher and higher. And the way that we kind of communicate that in the Torah is there's a difference between the oral Torah, the written Torah, right? And in the written Torah itself, you can have writing that is on a parchment, which means the letters exist as a separate piece of ink that you could scrape off, or you have what's called the luchos, which are engraved, which means there is no letter there. The letter is air, right? So it's the stone allows for there to be such a thing called a letter, which is a non-existent entity. So now we can go back to our conversation. How can you have many, which is simultaneously one? It doesn't make sense. Like if it's many, it's not one. And here the Chassidus shows us like this way of undressing. That's what we call the garments. Undressing those letters to the point that they have less and less materialism. To the point that they're inside the emotion. To the point that they're inside the mind. To the point that they're like the luchos. That they are non-existent letters. But it's filled with letters. Non-existent letters, but it's filled with letters. Did you follow that? Did you follow the train of thought there? It's there, but it's there in such a way of negation that it doesn't take up any space. Even already thought letters don't hardly take up space. But that's already at the end of the train of how refined and negated a letter can be. You getting this? So now talk about your soul. Imagine the letters are the revealed powers. That's your mind and your heart. They're like things. And they can go and exist at higher and higher frequencies to the point that those things are existing inside of a singularity that they don't exist and they do exist at the same time there. It's like the empty letters inside of the oneness. You getting this? And that's the essence. Hashem in his essence is one, and yet that oneness is not, we're not going to hold him back from also being simultaneously everything. But those two contradict each other. How could it be? Because the everything is reverberating in such a way that it does not interfere with the singularity. But it doesn't mean it's not there. And when Hashem, so to speak, shows us all this plurality, he's merely hiding the singularity. But it doesn't mean that we right now are not presently inside of a complete oneness and a state of non-being. And being at the same time. It's like we're like light beings. But we're not aware of that. We feel like we've been wrapped in like skins and we've been separated from the light. But that's only a lack of awareness. And when you get to the awareness of ushering forth the essence, you can be both light and vessel at the same time.
When you're able to tap into your essential powers, is that something that affects your emotions, or is it the emotions like it's used as like a filter between emotions and intellect?
Again, if you're really tapping into your essential powers in the like correct version of the essence, your emotions are not something other than that. They are one with your essence. That's what we're trying to say. Like the letters inside the light, there's no distinction between them and the light at that point. So there's not like an experience. There's no influence of the essence on you. Because that would be a misunderstanding of the true nature of the essence. It is you. I don't know if that helped or hurt your question there, but all right, let's wrap it up here on this paragraph. So I hope that was helpful. That's pretty much as good as I got on this one. But he says, if you come to the essence of the soul as it truly is in its essence, then the singularity and the plurality are all one. But al pi zeh yesh lomer. According to this, we can say, the bechinas ha'ma'or da neshama, that the luminary of the soul, because remember we said crushed to reach the luminary in the original verse we're dealing with, the luminary of the soul, the essence of the soul, shemizgal asayde mesiras nefesh, that's revealed through mesiras nefesh, through being willing to sacrifice your life. He etzem neshama kamoshi mugderes. That's only because you're dealing with a limited version of the essence. In other words, you're seeing it as only the singularity. And therefore it has to like influence you as though you're something other than it. Whereas the level of the ma'or, the luminary, which is revealed not because someone's chasing you, but just because you are dissatisfied with the reality because it's not godly. It's your own natural aversion to anything not godly. It's truly coming from you. It's because you've just tapped into the essence, which is rooted in the true nature of Hashem. In which case, there is no distinction between Him and His name, the singularity and the plurality. So when you're in the plurality and you're just like, wait, where's the singularity? I can't live without God. It's because you've tapped into the real essence where you understood that there is no distinction between the plurality and the singularity. And that's why you're dissatisfied, even though you have all the light. Because if there's one place where there's not light, you realize that you're dealing with a half deck. You're not talking about the real essence. If I had the real essence, it would be everywhere. Okay, let's move on. We have 2 more minutes, and we started a little bit late. So, chapter Yud Aleph. We'll just do a couple lines. We want to then connect this, Yesh Kasher Zeh im Hamavur Ba'amaimer, right? And this was the question that was our leading question at this stage in the Maimer, which we're now getting back to. Going back to the original verse, you shall command the Jewish people that shall bring you olive oil. So the Achre Shemoshe Tetzave v'Yikasher Bnei Yisrael, that we're saying basically after Moshe connects the Jewish people, Ata Tetzave means you shall connect the Jewish people to the Or Ein Sof, as we established. Then right afterwards, which basically means he's connecting us to our essence, the essence of our soul. Right afterwards it says they shall bring you olive oil. Now what's the story? What are we bringing him? Yisrael al yidei avudasam, that through our service, that Moshe basically going to connect us to our essence. Thank you. And then we're going to do some service. And with that service, we are going to then Yosifu Gili Or Madrigas Moshe. We're going to add something to Moshe's level, which means that Moshe himself can have an aliyah from us. V'yesh lomar, and we want to say, how do we explain this in terms of our own divine service? What are we doing, having been connected to our essence? Then what are we accomplishing, which then adds to Moshe's level? This that Moshe connects us, is that he, remember, is feeding us our faith, which it means that the faith should be more than just as it is regarding the revelations of the soul. In other words, from the fact that the soul above sees, that anyway we have faith, because our soul above sees. Moshe feeding us is that we should have a faith which is beyond that level of basic faith that our soul above sees, because when our soul above sees, we don't necessarily get nourished by that type of faith, because it's above us. So Moshe's job is to take that faith that we have because our soul above sees and nourish us with it, so that it should also, and if that's going to happen, it's because he's tapped us into our essence, which is enabling it to bring it into a panemius, that we can experience it. I feel like we're losing steam here, so we'll just hold here on the question, and we'll come with the answer tomorrow, B'ezrat Hashem. Okay, shukayach everyone.